it's an intimate connection. Yes, sex is pleasurable, and we want you to have pleasurable sex. We want that for you frequently. But it's more...
And we know that God wants that for you, too.
Absolutely. I mean, Proverbs talks about, enjoy the wife of your youth, may her breasts always be pleasing. We just read Song of Songs.
You may be one choice away from a thriving marriage. Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast with Bryon and Jennifer Harvey.
Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. I'm here with my husband, Bryon Harvey.
Hey, everybody.
And we also have Todd here, our producer, in the studio. I think we might have broken his equipment because we just started talking and he's saying his speakers aren't working now.
What did you do?
Oh, my goodness. Well, maybe it's the topic because all of you listeners, you've reached out to us, asked for more podcasts for us talking about sex. So here we are today.
So is your Irish self blushing again like you always say when we do these topics?
Like it often does. Absolutely. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so we're going to talk about sex, but what specifically are we talking about with sex this time?
Okay, so we're talking about the most overlooked sexual skill. But wait a second, we're not going into all the logistics.
That sounds a little bit like skirting the edge here.
Oh, goodness. So what are we talking about here, Bryon?
A lot of couples, I mean, they'll talk about sex, but they rarely talk about how sex actually starts, meaning the beginning of the sexual experience between the married couple. Talk about sex, wanting more sex and things like that. But it's tricky sometimes to initiate sex. And so that's the most overlooked skill, is actually initiating the encounter.
Oh, the initiation. So there you go. So many couples want to have that intimacy, but still feel awkward or rejected or misunderstood when initiating.
Well, and it's weird, right? Because certainly we talk about sex on the podcast. Pretty much every marriage podcast talks about sex at some point. Premarital counseling talks about sex, but there's not a lot of places that are appropriate to talk about sex, first of all. I mean, it's appropriate for couples to talk about that. But then because of that, and you don't grow up with your parents, with that be just gross, talking about how they're initiated. So it's something that obviously every sexual encounter is initiated. There's a lot of pop culture, sitcoms, rom-coms, things like that it's like they just look at each other and start ripping their clothes off. And so it creates kind of some weird things about how do we actually talk about that? Because I think that the rom-coms and all that stuff, they've created this myth that sex should always just be spontaneous. It's just like looked at each other and then just it's this passionate, crazy, mad. You're in the hallway, your clothes are being ripped off as you're walking up the stairs, and you're leaving just this trail of clothes around the house, which obviously for parents, you're not going to be doing that. So it just creates this false expectation, an uncomfortable environment of how do you actually initiate?
Oh, sure. And as you mentioned, many couples think that sex should begin with that instant desire, but many spouses don't experience that desire until after intimacy begins, right?
Yeah, we've done that episode on that before. I don't remember there's responsive desire, right? Where it's like you actually respond to that caress, that touch or whatever, and you're not aroused or interested before that.
And some spouses don't want to initiate because they're kind of waiting for the right feeling or the right time that just never seems to arrive. Or the other might assume a lack of desire equals lack of interest.
And that's often true where one spouse they'll have more of that early desire and the other spouse will have more of that responsive desire. If the spouse isn't like as excited or as interested, it's like, well, maybe they're just not interested at all. Maybe they're not interested in me. Maybe they don't like actually having, and especially in the media, the way it represents women in marriage, it's like, well, sex is just that kind of thing you have to do to keep your husband around, and creating this thing where women who often, because of hormones and the way the woman's body works, tend to often be more of that responsive arousal. And then it's not happening, and guys are thinking, well, maybe she just doesn't want it. Maybe that's just, now that we've had the 2 kids, maybe we're just done with that.
Mm-hmm. And the problem that comes into that is the couple has missed opportunities for that kind of connection through sex then. And there's frustration, for both people in the married couple. And then there becomes like this stalemate because neither spouse initiates. Yeah. And it's pretty awful to get stuck in that kind of a trap.
Just this rut of no sex because no one wants anything. The other thing that happens, though, for couples is the signals will just go unseen or unrecognized. Maybe one is interested and kind of hinting and saying, hey, they're interested in that experience, but it's too subtle. Mm-hmm. It's just, one of the things I tell people about for guys, hey, don't drop hints. We're not smart enough to pick them up. It's just, but things that are too subtle, they just don't get noticed. And then the person who's trying to initiate feels like, oh, I guess they're not interested. They're not, because they didn't pick that up, or it's misread. Mm-hmm. They don't understand what is being offered. And inconsistency. It's just like, if it's not something that, if you're not initiating on a consistent basis, then you can miss when that initiation happens. And so again, like hints instead of clarity, or mood dependent signals, things like, well, you got to be in the right mood. And so this thing may mean one thing when you are in the mood, but it may mean something totally different when you're not. And it gets confusing.
Right. And these are to an extent some communication things, but just the results of these signals that go unseen or unrecognized is you have one spouse who's potentially feeling rejected because the other, potentially didn't realize that they were being invited. Right. So that's a really difficult kind of thing. And for some people, in the couple, just different partners, different ideas there, initiation can feel like you're pressuring the other spouse to engage in sex,
or feeling like you are being pressured. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes both ways, right?
Yeah, because so it feels more demanding. Mm-hmm. Instead of being a gift to experience each other like that. We've talked about this before on some different podcasts and in different live experiences, but just the idea of the fear of rejection and these mismatched expectations that are the unexpectations. And
I think that's really probably, of all the things, I think the 2 things that are probably the most significant, one are the unseen or unrecognized initiations, and the fear of rejection, mm-hmm. and the mismatch where it's like, I don't want to ask or offer because that it's so uncomfortable and so hurtful to be rejected. Mm-hmm. And that fear of, well, I'd rather just miss out on giving myself to you in this way, or experiencing this with you, or having the, because the feeling of rejection is so bad.
Right. You don't want the rejection, or, I don't feel like having sex this evening, or I don't want to. And some of it is I'm exhausted. I just like these different things that we've heard from different couples and things like that can be interpreted as, well, you don't want me at all, or I'm somehow failing as a spouse. And then that can really throw the couple into this negative feedback loop that then, being afraid of that rejection, it reduces the attempts to connect physically, and there are these fewer attempts then would reduce that kind of connection physically and just otherwise experiencing intimacy and closeness in the marriage.
And I think it's important to bring out that makes sense. And if you're feeling that way, we're going to talk about in a minute some ideas and some ways to help you reframe initiating sex and reframe with it so that you can get past some of these things. But your marriage isn't messed up if you're feeling this way. Mm-hmm. It's not.
That's true.
You haven't lost connection. You haven't ruined things because it's hard to initiate sex, because it's hard for everyone to initiate sex. Like we said at the beginning, it's not a common thing you learn. I mean, when they teach sex ed in school, they teach the mechanics and they teach sexually transmitted diseases. They're not teaching.
So much is left off of that too, but that's another conversation altogether.
For sure. But the point being, it's not like there's classes and then rom-coms and things. They're creating this false expectation. So once you know that if you're feeling this way, if you're feeling that there's just fewer attempts and fewer sexual connections in your marriage, that's not a place you have to stay and not a place that you have to be stuck. But it makes sense if you find yourself there, and that's okay, and you're not doomed to a sexless marriage because you find yourself in a place where that's not happening right now.
In initiation, it's not necessarily, an inherent, understood, instinctive thing. It's a skill, and it's necessary,
Yes.
and it's important for you and your spouse to, work on this, learn this, and have this be a very healthy thing for you, because that healthy initiation is learned and it's practiced and it's shaped by you two working together and understanding what works well for each of you.
For a majority of couples, for a majority of the time, it doesn't just happen.
Mm-hmm.
There are those moments, there are those times when the romance is high, different things, and that can happen, and those are fantastic experiences, but they're not better than other experiences. That just happens to be that moment. I really love what Song of Solomon says about this. Encouraging this initiation. God is encouraging spouses to ask and initiate sex. This, draw me after you. Let us hurry. May the king bring me into his bedroom chambers. And that's Song of Solomon 1:4.
There's no confusion there.
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say is this is written a woman talking about a husband initiating.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much she wants him to initiate. What I will say to this is it's okay for women to initiate too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hoping that your husband will initiate, but for many of the reasons we've already mentioned, maybe he's not, it's okay for you to initiate as well. I will say this, men and women both want to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, often it's like, men want to pursue, and that's true, and I think women want to pursue sometimes too, but both men and women want to be asked. Your spouse wants you to initiate sometimes.
Initiation is about offering yourself intimately and completely to your spouse. It's not principally about extracting pleasure from your spouse.
Yeah, we'll say in our live events that we use sex to draw closer to our spouse. We should never use our spouse to enjoy sex.
Absolutely. And I think that just adds to that, in initiation, it's an invitation. It's not a demand. Of course, neither spouse should be trying to force a sexual encounter to occur. And it's a shared movement together towards connection. Healthy initiation, of course, creates safety. It allows a response, not pressure. And the answer is not always going to be yes or right now.
Absolutely. And that's something to remember too, going back to what is sex, and the Old Testament euphemism. We've talked about this before many times on the podcast. The Old Testament euphemism for sex is the verb yada, which means to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's an intimate connection. Yes, sex is pleasurable, and we want you to have pleasurable sex.
Mm-hmm.
We want that for you frequently. But it's more...
And we know that God wants that for you too.
Absolutely. Proverbs talks about enjoy the wife of your youth. May her breasts always be pleasing. We just read Song of Solomon. It talks about that. It's much more about becoming one, that connection between you. Mm-hmm. And when you focus on that, I think it makes initiation easier because then both of you are looking at this as an opportunity for us to connect, not I'm asking for physical pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the big thing that a lot of couples struggle with initiation. It feels like, I'm just asking because I want to get this pleasure, and not understanding that the whole purpose of this is for us to be closer, to know each other intimately.
Right. It's a mutuality to it. And we've also talked about this pretty frequently, which is initiation often is starting outside of the bedroom and begins long before that with things like non-sexual touch, kindness, playfulness, flirtation throughout the day. And these moments, again, outside of the bedroom, these are lowering anxiety, they're building emotional safety, and then they're preparing both of you for that responsive desire.
And let's hit on that a little bit more, sweetheart, because we've talked a lot about, and the whole sex begins in the kitchen thing. I think that's pretty well known in our culture. But I think those last
sex begins in the kitchen thing, could you elaborate on that?
So the idea of, again, what Jen was just saying, the non-sexual touch, the kindness, the idea of you're experiencing romance and connection and flirtation outside of the bedroom. So that's creating the desire. But see, I really want to hit on those last 3 points you made, why this is important. Because I think a lot of times, especially as a guy, you'll hear a lot of the things about, hey, you need to be dating your wife, chasing your wife, and all these things throughout the day. And it almost creates almost gamifies it a little bit to, you won the game if there's sex at the end of the day. You didn't do a good enough job. If you didn't do if no sex at the end of the day, you didn't do that. All these things, what they do, again, is like you said, they lower anxiety. You're feeling connection. You're not feeling pressure. And you're just honestly, non-sexual touch, kissing, flirting throughout the day, sending texts, that's lowering your spouse's anxiety, if it's done well, about just life in general. They're feeling good about the relationship. It's also those reminders that, hey, this is the safest human relationship I have. I'm having these moments of connection. I'm feeling close. I'm feeling cared for. That's what these things do to make it easier to initiate sex later.
Mm-hmm. And there are also ways to make that initiation easier. And some of that is being able to remove the ambiguity. And you can use intentional and purposeful, agreed upon cues for that. And I know that you had, talked about, having a friendship where the guy that you were buddies with had talked about like lighting a candle. So either the wife or the husband, would be lighting a candle. And then, if the other spouse was not interested in that activity for that evening, would just blow out the candle. And of course, anybody out here, musical theaters, the Rent heads, I'm thinking of the song "Would You Light My Candle" between Roger and Mimi, which had nothing to do with this, but was pretty hilarious.
Actually, yes, it did.
It had more to do with that.
It had everything to do with this, just not in a healthy way.
Would you light my candle?
Yeah.
What are you staring at?
Yeah, it was very, very unhealthy sexual encounters going on in Rent.
But, again, that was an unmarried couple. We're a little off topic, my friends, but just the idea of what are some signals that you might be able to have, and maybe even something that you might kind of laugh about, because, again, Bryon and I kind of talking about the musical theater kind of piece of that. Could be burning incense. That might be a thing for some people. Folding down the bed sheets, or, doing that in a certain kind of way. Yeah,
or even like using coded language. It's like one of those, because then you also get the experience of, hey, you can talk about this and no one else knows what you're talking about.
Sure.
So different things like that. And that the thing that I think is most valuable about having a conversation about how we're going to initiate and removing the ambiguity is it reduces the fear of rejection, because it's easier to, let's say, light a candle and your spouse come by and blow out the candle than to walk up and say, hey, do you want to have sex tonight, and be told no.
Sure.
It's just, it's like, okay, it's the same result, but it's less confrontational is the word that I'm coming to, but I don't mean that in a sense of like confronting in a fighting way. It's just like, it's not being rejected to your face. It's gentler, I guess, is the way it is. It's gentler than just being told no.
Sure, and I think that it's different for different couples as well. Just
Absolutely.
Like what kind of works the best there. Like you said, it can reduce some of that awkwardness, kind of fears of rejection, and then that initiation might feel more collaborative.
And I think that's a big deal too. It's you two discussing together how you want to initiate. So it's not being forced by one spouse or the other. It's not, oh, I've got to come up with all the creative ideas on my own type thing.
And I'm awful here because, of course, I'm thinking like Odysseus coming back with the dark sails versus the light sails. Did he live? Did he not? That's not what we're talking about here.
But you need to explain that now.
Oh, okay. So the idea was Odysseus. We thought that everybody kind of odds were against him. We thought he was going to kind of die on his quest, so he went off with these dark sails. Everybody's mourning him, and thought that they would see him coming back with these same dark sails. But they just said if you were successful in your quest, you'd come back with the lighter colored sails. And in his excitement and exuberance to get back, he forgot to change the sails, and a lot of people thought that he was dead on the way,
including
back,
his wife,
and which ended in a lot of disaster.
Yes.
So that's kind of where we were on that. So I'll stop talking about the myths, my friends. It's not that kind of a podcast, although I know our daughter, who is going to be having a minor in the classics, has given us a thumbs up if she was here, just as to that part of the
And I think
podcast.
There's a new movie version of the Odyssey coming out soon, so you guys can go check that out too.
And we'll see that and talk about it. But let's also talk about, in this podcast episode in particular, the normalization of scheduling sex, because I think that this is something that is, very, very contrary to culture, or people might hear this and dismiss it. But I think it's a really good hack for you as a married couple.
Yeah, scheduled sex is sexy. It's just that appointment on the calendar. You're going to be looking forward to that
Something to look forward to after a difficult, work, school, whatever week.
Right. I feel like some people just feel like it's too mundane, or it's like, where's the romance? Where's the passion in that? A lot.
And it can be experienced at that time on that day.
Right. And there's the time leading up to it, and the fact that you talked about it. So you have that, hey, you're scheduling it, all of that leading up to it. It doesn't fit the rom-com. You chased each other through the airport and were making out in the cab and ripping your clothes off as soon as you got through the door.
That poor cabbie. I hope he was tipped well.
It's because none of that is real. That's written. It's fiction.
Yes, we don't have writers for our lives.
And so actually scheduling that, the anticipation builds the desire. I mean, it's just part of the physical desire, the hormonal response builds when you know it on the calendar or just in your head, hey, this is going to happen. It's creating that desire in you.
And that mental kind of preparation of, okay, this particular day, evening, whatever it is, it reduces the pressure, because it's like, okay, we've got this on the calendar. This is the plan. That's kind of awesome.
And it removes guess. It's not like, will we, won't we, will we, won't we, will we, won't we. It's like, no, we know this is the plan. This is going to happen. There's no guesswork or anxiety about that.
And of course, if that's something that needed to be rescheduled for whatever reason, it's not a do or die kind of situation. I think it's good to be, open to, this might need to be rescheduled, but to try to keep that appointment as best as you can, I think is a healthy thing.
And I think that it's one of those, yes, if it has to be rescheduled, sickness, things go, I mean, you get a phone call and just something horrible happened at work or something. I mean, obviously, what you don't want to do is reschedule it frequently, because that can be a tease.
Oh, exactly. Because you want to do everything you can do to keep the appointment, but also just be open to, something might happen where you can't. But I would say that should be pretty rare. Normalizing that scheduling, it can also support that responsive desire that we had talked about a little bit ago as well. And then it creates that shared expectation rather than, potentially a surprise that wasn't expected. And it's like, oh, I'm just hearing about this now.
Right. It's like, oh, you want to do that? Oh, yeah, that's great. Sure. But I wasn't planning on that.
Right.
It's so having that. And another thing when it comes with initiation is lower the emotional stakes of the no.
Oh, absolutely.
It's okay to ask and be asked, and the answer is no, or not today, or not right now. Because that's not, I reject you sexually. It's, I can't love you in this way right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something going on emotionally, mentally, physically. It's just not now means not now, doesn't mean not ever.
Mm-hmm.
And also, a no to a sexual advance does not mean I don't love you. It does not mean I am not attracted to you. It does not mean I do not desire you sexually. It just means this is not the right time, the right moment to experience this together.
And I think it helps to reduce, in any way that you feel like, you're reducing like a risk of a rejection. Like if there are indirect signals, like you had addressed a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
Bryon, that might allow something that would be a more gentle, polite decline as to that. And I think that there can be less shame in that and less defensiveness.
And I think that goes for both the initiator and the one being offered, because what you don't want to do is create a thing where anytime someone tries to initiate, the person feels forced because they feel like, oh, you're going to think I'm rejecting you as a person.
Or obligated, or it's like feeling forced or obligated. It's like, that's just not sexy.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that you have to be in this mad euphoric state of passion every time you have sex as a couple. There are times when, hey, I want to love you this way, even though I'm not particularly aroused right now. And that's okay too. And so those things you have to work out together as a couple. It's okay to be persistent without being pressuring. It's okay to, hey, I get it. Last night wasn't really the right time. And if you handle rejection well and build that safety outside the bedroom in your relationship, you're going to be able to have those conversations, and then it's going to be easier to continue to be persistent, and you're not going to feel rejected or hurt just because it didn't happen that time. I will say that this does mean that you have to be prepared to respond to yes when your spouse is initiating. You can't always say no. So there is that aspect of it. So that may mean having a conversation. What is it about life right now? What is it about the way your spouse is initiating, or what's going on outside the bedroom that's making the yes more difficult?
Sure.
And all of the things we're talking about here is we're hoping to make the yes, make it easy to say yes. We talk about that a lot in leadership. When you've got an idea, you want to come up with all the potential no's and deal with those to make it easy for the decision maker to say yes. So in initiating, you want to deal with all the things in life to make it easy for your spouse to say yes to you.
And have it be a mutuality to that. And it's important to remember that desire differences are never a failure, but they're just a design reality, because the difference is desire for frequency versus desire for emotional safety. And, there's no right or wrong here. Sometimes, just within the couple, the different partners are experiencing sex in different ways.
That is almost 100% guaranteed. Two individuals, you're never going to experience the exact same way, and that's okay. And the goal is to work it out so you can both be experiencing sex in a healthy way that is also appropriately frequent for you as a couple. And there's no right answer to how often. The right answer to how often is however often you and your spouse decide you're going to.
And again, that just the mutuality of decision, and that you both feel comfortable with it and not pressured. And these are different ways of seeking connection, and that mutual understanding will lead to better initiation for both of you.
Here's the thing. Initiation is one of the most overlooked and learnable sexual skills. This is a skill you can learn to build a healthy, thriving sex life in your marriage. Awkwardness doesn't mean incompatibility. It's awkward. It's different. You haven't been initiating sex with a spouse other than your spouse, remarriage. But in general, this is a new thing for both of you. You haven't been working this unless you've been married a long time. And sometimes you've been married a long time and not been doing this well. And that's okay. Because just small changes create big shifts in connection. And when initiation becomes safer, desire becomes freer, and intimacy becomes more mutual. Make initiation easier, lower the stakes of no, honor each other's differences and desire, and this will help you build that healthy, thriving sex life in your marriage. Thank you so much for listening to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. We appreciate all of you. Encourage you to please rate, subscribe, and share this episode.
Jen and I started Operation Thriving Marriage to help couples and churches take marriages from merely surviving to thriving. We've got our book, we've got a blog and resources for our coaching ministry, and you can bring us out for an Operation Thriving Marriage experience. For more information, go to OperationThrivingMarriage.com. That's OperationThrivingMarriage.com.